Hi, Ted Porter from BeemerShop.com. Today we are here to talk to you about ESA suspension. We are the best place in North America to get your ESA suspension upgrades. Probably in Central America too, and South America, all the Americas. We are the best place to get your ESA suspension because we have so many options. And today I want to talk about one bike in particular that has, it's a little bit of a problem child. It's got some issues with its ESA motors, and a lot of people don't know about this issue, so we're going to show you. This is for the 05 to 09 R1200RT, which has ESA1. Now, some 2010 models also have ESA1, even though technically they're supposed to be ESA2. So if you have a 2010 model, and the top of your shock has this big black cup right where the spring ends, that is not ESA1. This is ESA2, and we'll talk about that in another video. The ESA2 models don't have as big of a problem or as many problems as the ESA1 has. So let's talk about what ESA1 is on the 05 to 09 R12RT. ESA was invented by WP, actually the engineers who now own the Tractive company, which is this product, which we're going to talk about in a second. This was their first go-round of the ESA1. These are the original ESA1 shocks from the 05 to 09 RT. And they had some problems with their Rebound motors, and they had some problems with their Preload motors. And it's really important to know if you have an issue with either one of these motors, if you are about to do a suspension upgrade that reuses these motors. So the first thing that we see, it's a very common issue, is that water can get into the lower eyelet. So in fact, I unscrewed the lower eyelet off of this shock. So when we do a Wilbur's ESA conversion, we remove this lower eyelet from your original front shock, and we screw it on to the replacement Wilbur's front shock, which is this guy right here. The problem is that these motors get rust in them. The water infiltrates this area through capillary action, and these motors get rusty. Here's a really good example of a rusted motor out of an 05 to 09 RT. This motor obviously quit working. So we have a tester. Whenever we do an ESA conversion, we always make sure these motors are working. And I went through my stash of 05 to 09 RT motors, and I had a hard time finding one that was any good. And I did finally find one, and this will show you what this motor actually does. This motor is responsible for your comfort, normal, and sport settings. And when you're in the comfort setting, this motor is pulled back all the way. When you go to the normal setting, it goes up a few millimeters, and then the sport setting, it goes up even further. And when we test them, it's supposed to do that. And so often when we test them, they are duds, and they do nothing. And that's because of the moisture that gets inside this motor. So there'll be another video where we're going to show how you can tell. When this motor goes up and down, it's the same thing as a manually adjustable shock as you turning this knob. You're basically pushing a rod up through the center of the shaft, and there's a little valve in there that controls the oil flow. And so as you unscrew this, this would be like being down in your comfort setting. As you go about halfway into the range, it's like being in your normal setting, and then you go up higher, and it's like being in the sports setting. That's essentially what this motor is doing for you. But when they don't work, that's an issue. And like I said, we'll have another video that shows how you can push down on your bike, watch the rebound action, and determine whether or not the motor is actually working. Tractive has a nice solution for this because they give you a new rebound motor. And again, since they invented ESA to begin with, they are aware of this problem. And this is the Wilbur's replacement shock, which is an excellent value. This is always going to be your lower cost option, and they work exceptionally well as long as your rebound motor is working. The Tractive company, they, being aware of this issue, they actually give you a new rebound motor. So their front shock for the 05 to 09 RT is 100% complete. There is a new rebound motor in here, so this reuses nothing off of your stock shock. The other issue that the 05 to 09 RT has, here's an example of the original shock, is that when they originally designed this concept, they determined that a little bit of nitrogen pressure behind the piston would help push this preload piston down. This is your one rider with luggage, and two rider settings. So this chamber in here is where the nitrogen lives. The problem is that turns out this casting is a little bit porous, and over time this nitrogen can leak out, leaving the motor to do all the work. And this is our display. Well, let's talk about the Wilbur's one first. So this is the Wilbur's replacement. Again, reuses the Rebound motor, reuses the preload motor. Lower cost option. They dampen really well. They're fully rebuildable. They have a 5-year warranty. And it's an excellent lower cost option as long as these motors are working. So what happened, I used this motor that we had laying around for our display shock, and I went to plug it in today, and it's one of those that doesn't work. So what happens, the way it's supposed to operate, is as you give this motor voltage, it's supposed to go in one direction, and then as you reverse the polarity, it's supposed to go in the opposite direction. And you can test these on your bike, because when you're in the one rider position, this piston should be all the way down. When you go up into the one rider with luggage position, can you see that, or should I flip it around? Let's flip this around the other way. When you go to the one rider with luggage position, this piston, rats, just lost my voltage. This motor will start pushing this piston down. In the one rider with luggage, I guess I'm retracting here. Let's go up. There we go. So when you go from one rider to one rider with luggage, that thing will push down about 5 millimeters and stop. Then when you go into the two rider position, that piston will push that spring down about 10 millimeters and stop. Without the nitrogen in there to help that piston, all the work is now being done by this electric motor, and it's not strong enough to do it. So a couple things happen. Number one, the amperage draw to push this piston down can exceed what's in the bike's controller, and as a result, it'll just throw a fault code and quit working. I understand there was a firmware update with BMW at some point to raise that amperage limit. And then the other thing, of course, is this thing can just seize up and quit working. So the best thing you can do with these preload motors to be kind to the motor is make your preload adjustments up on the center stand. Don't wait till you're off the center stand, sitting on the bike, got your passenger on the bike, you're fully loaded with luggage, and then you ask this motor to lift up all of that load. You should do it before you load up the bike. That'll make these preload motors last longer. So we'll go ahead and retract this motor, which is the same thing as going to the one rider position. And like I said, you can see this. Run it through the positions. Make sure that this motor is moving. If it's moving, the preloader is still working. So what happens if your preloader quits working and you still want to do an ESA conversion? Well, that rules out this conversion, and that rules out this conversion. So now what? Well, you can try and find a good used preload motor, as in this case, or Tractive has another solution. Since they're aware of this problem, they came out with a hydraulic preload adjuster, but it's still an ESA shock. So in other words, your comfort, normal, and sport positions will continue to work. When you need preload, this will be under the seat, and you can crank up the preload. You can see this piston moving. Here, I'll go backwards and start retracting the piston by turning the knob. One of the nice things about the hydraulic preload adjuster, now just to be clear, you'll still have your comfort, normal, and sport settings, but when you go to one rider with luggage, and two riders, that will not function. It just won't do anything because that motor's been unplugged. There will be no warnings on the display. Everything will still function normally. But if you need to add preload to set your sag properly for your loads, you now lift the seat and turn this knob. One of the nice things about doing it this way is that you have a heck of a lot more stroke. This thing has 15 millimeters of preload. This only has 10. And secondly, this is very granular. You know, you can stop turning the knob wherever you need to stop turning the knob to get your sag perfect. On the R1200RT, you should have 1.5 inches of rider sag. And sometimes with the ESA preload, one position may not be enough, and the other position may be too much. So this you can stop turning at exactly the right amount of preload. So it's a very cool option from Tractive to make sure that you maintain your ability to adjust preload. So anyway, that's it. If you got an 05 to 09 R1200RT, you may have a preload issue. You can see if that's working or not. You may have a rebound damping issue, and we will show you on a motorcycle how to determine whether that rebound damping adjuster works or not. Bottom line is, when you push down on your motorcycle and you watch it rebound, when you're in the comfort setting, it should rebound very quickly. When you go up to the sports setting, it should rebound very slowly, and this is something you can actually see by giving the bike a good shove and watching the thing rebound. So that's it for this video. Hope you guys found it informative. Remember to keep BeemerShop.com in mind for all your ESA suspension needs.